What will happen if the plane flies into space? You are looking at the white clouds under your plane, and suddenly you hear a conversation between two flight attendants. They sound scared. One moment and they are no longer standing in the aisle. They are floating in the air together with almost half of the passengers of the flight. The only thing that prevents you from joining them is your seat belt. At least some benefit from this rule about a fastened belt. Soon the captain's voice is heard. "Dear passengers," he says, "we accidentally left the Earth's atmosphere and went into outer space. Please be careful." Well, that explains a lot. The flight attendants are trying to pretend that nothing special has happened. They float down the aisle, holding on to the headrests and hand luggage compartments, and even try to serve lunch. Yes, in zero gravity, orange juice looks very beautiful. At some point, you decide to unfasten your seat belt. You can't control your movements, but just float to where the draft takes you. Sometimes you run into other passengers. If the trip lasts a long time, you will have to get used to the lifestyle that astronauts lead on the ISS. If you suddenly get homesick and start crying, then your tears will not roll down your cheeks and fall on your t-shirt. They will remain for centuries, burning them. You will not be able to take a shower, as the water will turn into bubbles and fly away. You will need to use special wet wipes to remove dirt. Unfortunately, if the plane takes off into outer space, the adventure will not last long. Airplanes are not designed to fly in space. The average cruising altitude of the aircraft is from 9.5 to 11.5 thousand meters. At this altitude, the air becomes thinner. It is easier for the plane to fly there, and it burns less fuel, saving the airline money. He can't fly lower, but he can't fly higher either. As soon as the passenger plane takes off from the airport, the first thing the pilots do is lift the plane to the desired height. The average aircraft reaches a cruising altitude of 10 to 11 kilometers in the first 10 minutes of flight. At the same time, each aircraft has its own cruising altitude based on its features. For example, the supersonic Concorde airliner, whose maximum speed was twice the speed of sound, flew higher than other aircraft at an altitude of 15 to 17,000 meters. At high altitude, the aircraft manages to avoid bad weather, strong winds, and heavy rains. In addition, it allows aircraft to avoid heavy air traffic, helicopters, and small planes, and stay away from birds and large insects. And most importantly, if an emergency occurs at an altitude of more than 10 kilometers, the pilots will have enough time to find the best solution. So, the higher the better. But then why don't planes go even higher? At high altitude, it takes longer to get back to a safe distance from the ground. And in emergency situations, such as rapid decompression, every second is precious. In addition, during flight at such high altitudes, aircraft crews cannot communicate with ground services as effectively as at normal altitude. The higher, the thinner the air. It's not so bad, as long as the plane doesn't go too high. There, the air may become too thin to provide lift to keep the aircraft in the air. It is the difference in air pressure that creates the necessary lifting force. But at high altitude, there is almost no difference. In addition, at high altitude, oxygen becomes too little to power the engines. The plane will get less and less air, and at some point it will simply run out of thrust, which will lead to a disaster. When flying at lower altitudes, airliners can rely on wind, but at higher altitudes they need too much energy and fuel to stay in the air. And don't forget about the weight. The more the plane weighs, the harder it is to lift it. Thank you for watching the video. Like, subscribe to the channel, and write a comment. See you in the next story.